First of all, thank you so much for giving up your afternoon, coming out here to the farmstead and talking about Ahiflower and life in general. And we've got Alexis Collins from Stratum Nutrition here, Justin Bird from Nature's Crops, and Caroline Beckman from Nouri. Thank you.
Well, I mean, just an insane ingredient in general. Maybe you could tell us like the background that you've done so well in the past of telling us how it even came to be.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep this slightly condensed, but going way back in the past, so a good friend of mine was a fat chemist. Now that doesn't mean he was a chemist that was fat. It means he was a chemist who studied fat, and he was also one of the inventors of Lorenzo's oil. If you've seen the movie Lorenzo's Oil, and so he really understood the metabolism of essential fatty acids and their effect on health and wellness. And his company at the time was studying the role of essential fatty acids in certain conditions. And he said, if this science starts to mature and becomes available to the consumer and consumer products are developed, this could have a really bad knock-on effect to fish oil populations. And I said, well, why is that, Keith? He said, well, because nearly all of the research being done is on fish oil because they contain these essential fatty acids. Mm-hmm. And he said, so my advice would be go and find a plant that has the same oil properties or the same chemical properties as fish oil. And my company at the time specialized in going out into the wilderness and looking for different plant types that had unique health and wellness benefits, but they were wild harvested, so not really sustainable in terms of going out and harvesting them. And what we focused on is how to identify plants from the wild and bring them back to a farm environment and train growers to grow them sort of sustainably, or as we now say, regeneratively, which I'll touch on in a minute, and something that we could really partner with the farmer to make sure it complied with things like safety and biodiversity and those sort of things. So we started looking around the world for different plants and finding something with a profile of fish oil is really quite unusual. But we whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down. And we found this really cool plant in the UK, and its Latin name was called Buglozoides arbensis, which isn't that good for marketing. So we sort of worked on how to rename it as something a bit more marketable. But we found this really cool plant and we looked at its fatty acid profile. And of course, this was before the days of the internet. So we couldn't Google it or research it. We had to go to the Natural History Museum and turn pages of old compendiums and sort of look at what we thought would be a good species. Anyway, we thought we'd found this really good solution. Then we went to plant it and it didn't grow. And the old sort of adage of reaping more than you sow, we reaped a heck of a lot less than we sowed. So that's where we thought, well, this is the right plant. We then recruited a group of farmers to work with us, and we gave them the challenge. We said, if you can learn how to grow this and really turn it from something that would rather die to something that's really prolific in the fields, we can take it to market. And sure enough, over about 10 years, they went from a crop that was yielding pretty much about 100 kilos a hectare, which is about 100 pounds an acre, to something that's now 2,500 pounds a hectare. So huge advancement, and just through good old-fashioned farming, going out and looking at the crop and learning how to grow it and making sure the sort of crop husbandry is right. So we built a supply chain, and we were really impressed by the quality of the oil. So we did some more clinical trials, and then we went through all of the safety and regulatory processes to make sure that we could take it to the consumer and comply with FDA, and in Europe we have EFSA, and in other parts of the world we have different sort of competent agencies that we work with. And we found that it's completely safe, and of course being plant-derived has a lot of the benefits that vegans and vegetarians associate with, such as I feel good about where my food comes from. Mm-hmm. It has a good taste. Mm-hmm. It clearly has health benefits. And because I mentioned earlier how we grow it regeneratively, regenerative agriculture is now becoming something that's recognized as sustainability is about making sure, in our world, it's making sure that you don't take more than you give. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that could be applied to many different things. Regenerative is actually giving back more than you take. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to work with farmers to say, how can you enrich the environment in which you're growing crops in? And that enriching might be a better habitat for bees and worms and butterflies. Mm-hmm. It might be giving back more biomass into the fields instead of taking it away. So all of our growers following principles of regenerative agriculture.
Awesome.
So that's a very long-winded answer to a 20-year story compressed down. But really, it started by looking for what nature has to offer, and with natural products, recognizing that there's no new species created, you have to work with what you've got. You've really got two choices: either use biodiversity, which is what nature has given us, or biotechnology and create something new through genetic engineering or gene editing. So we really went out and looked for something that nature had given us and found a way to bring it to consumers safely, traceably and affordably.